I want to welcome you to the new normal. I'm Brian Morrissey. I'm the editor-in-chief and president of Digiday. And I am joined this week for a special fireside chat by Deirdre Lester. Deirdre is the CRO of Barstool Sports. Deirdre, thank you so much for joining us. And is that a real fire?
It's a real fire. It's May, but it is not warm out, so we're working on the fire.
How bad is it out there, Deirdre?
Well, first I want to ask you why you don't have like an amazing Zoom background, like a custom Zoom background.
Well, I have a theory. If we want to start on there, I have a theory. There are two types of people in the world: the virtual background people and the people who just have a normal background. I tweeted this. I got a lot of people coming at me, and they're like, creative people, and there's people who don't have fun in life. And I was like, okay, you're reading into the question.
If you didn't account for the third people who have a fireside chat.
Yeah, this is what I want more. See, if you look at my background, there is actually, right here, there's a little Easter egg because I'm in suburban Philadelphia, and it's not the house I grew up in, but I found this weird, creepy clown, so I
Nice.
put it in there. So
Yeah,
let's get back to the how terrible.
Business, yeah. I mean, look, so I'm up in Rye, New York. I feel very fortunate to be in the suburbs. The suburbs have never been as glamorous as they are right now. Having a yard and being able to ride my bike around the neighborhood is like a huge luxury compared to what some of our colleagues and friends are dealing with living in the big cities, the big metro areas. Personally, we're surviving here at the Lester household pretty well, all things relative. Business has been a roller coaster, like just a downright every other day is a roller coaster. And it's been a wild ride. We have a lot of positive things going on at our place at Barstool Sports, but everyone's affected. There's nobody, COVID-19 does not have, everyone's affected, for better, for worse, and a lot of folks for worse, but there's just definitely a lot of activity. It's very busy, despite being home and trying to balance, working from home and also having a full house of, kids here doing school from home. We are incredibly busy with what's going on today.
Okay, so you say a lot of activity. Let's talk about the business activity. Obviously, we'll talk about how Barstool is adapting its own content when sports is a way to organize. It seems to me the show, but it's not the same as like an ESPN or something like this. It's
right.
Particularly Barstool is more it's lifestyle, right? And let's just talk
right on that point, Brian. It's a great point. Like Barstool Sports is our name, but really we are. We are about sports, and sports is very much a through line in a lot of our major shows and content. And we care a lot about sports, and we comment on all professional sports and even beyond. But we are also about pop culture. We are also about just like a lifestyle brand, what's going on, what's relevant, what are people, how do you talk to your friends, so it definitely benefits us that we are not solely focused on sports, because without any live sports to talk about, without any live sports to bet on, which says a lot about our future, we still have a lot going on. We still have a lot to talk about. And we still have a lot of people tuning in to hear what our point of view is on a day-to-day basis about everything else that's going on in the world and sports. So sports is coming back and we can't wait for it. But at the same time, like, we have higher website traffic, video viewership is up incredibly. There's a lot of positives in that we are just a conversation starter, a conversation piece outside of sports, just sort of about all things going on in culture for young people today.
I mean, you mentioned before that, coronavirus impacts everyone, affects everyone. I hate impacts. Affects everyone and every business. There's acute varieties of businesses where it affects more. If you're in the travel industry, it really affected you. If you have a large events business, it affects you. So if I were to look down the sort of Barstool, there's overall lower ad demand, and we'll get to that. But I would guess here's my take. I think that you guys are really hit by the live events business because of Rough and Rowdy and the subscription. You're probably seeing lower demand for podcasts because people are generally podcasts are down 20 to 30%. Then again, people are shifting into DR marketing. Let's start on those two things. How acute is the deterioration we're seeing in those two? When you can't have live events, so that's
No, and here, look, like the reality, like when this all happened, the timing of it, it's so acute, it's so measurable. Like literally, the country locked down and the NCAA tournament was canceled. March Madness was not happening. And there's some networks out there that were impacted way beyond what I can imagine. But we had a lot going on there. We had a huge March Madness, a huge Final Four activation plan for Atlanta, and all of those plans were immediately canceled. All of those ad dollars were immediately sidelined. What we've been able to do is convince some of those advertisers, hey, look at our content now, a few weeks after all of the shutdown. We're seeing that engagement, we're seeing that viewership. We've developed new shows, immediately pivoted, and your business is still thriving. So would you like to be part of these shows because there is no NCAA tournament? But March was a time you needed to be in market with your messaging, and you chose March Madness because that's what's normally everybody's tuned into. But now everyone's tuned into other things, and we can show you what some of those things are. And we've been able to salvage some of those deals and some of those partnerships because some of our partners' businesses are doing well or thriving. And so they just needed to pivot to what are people watching now, given that there aren't any live sports happening. So definitely all of our events business is on hold. We have a massive golf tournament that we do. It's actually last year was its first season, the Barstool Classic. We have planned 14 amateur golf outings all around the country that were supposed to start in April at Monarch Beach in California. And obviously now those are on hold. We are still planning to get all 14 events in starting in mid to late June and going through October. But we've had to be in constant communication with all of those golf courses to make sure that they're going to have availability for us and that they're going to be flexible with us as things move and change. So yes, events business is very much tentative right now, which is it's challenging, it's painful, it's taking a lot of dollars that were already sort of booked and allocated and pushing them back to the latter part of the year. Or we're just finding a lot of brands maybe want to pivot and do something virtual.
yeah. But are you seeing that kind of flexibility? Because as you said, we are kind of all in this together. I think in everyone, there needs to be some sort of flexibility, right? I mean, like, I'm sure if you have like a travel client and they're like, there's nothing happening in travel, like they gotta get out. But I'm sure you're messaging, to your advertisers that, hey, we're still seeing engagement and like you still got to be in market.
Yes.
What are the six? What are you finding that successful?
A great example, and I think it's up on the screen right now. We have a show called Chicks in the Office. For those that don't know, Rhea and Fran are the hosts of that show. It's actually a franchise. It has an Instagram show. It has a podcast and radio show. Has a massive social following. And Rhea and Fran are usually together, and they usually sit right beside one another and make that show, and they comment on everything, celebrity, pop culture, what's going on in that world. It's like a modern day version of e-news. And they're obviously separate right now. And, we were just on the cusp of launching a big partnership with Macy's, where Rhea and Fran were going to do this whole branded content series. Our office in New York City is 4 blocks from Herald Square. They were going to be filming videos of themselves like shopping in Macy's and picking out their outfits for spring. And obviously Macy's is shut down. All of their retail stores across the country, they're starting to talk about opening them back up. But what that looks like for retail is going to be really interesting, and it's going to be really hard. But Macy's, while they sidelined a lot of media, they actually looked at us and said, we want to keep this partnership. We think you guys can help us. We think your consumer is going to be the likely consumer to pivot to e-commerce. And if Ria and Fran can kind of pivot to that, we will have stylists get on the phone with them. They can pick out their styles, over the phone. We'll mail everything to them, and then they can do videos from, remotely from home. And that's what they've been doing for Macy's, and it's been really successful in driving e-commerce activity. So that's a great example. But to your point, there are businesses, and we have a lot of partners that they're just shut down right now, right? We have a massive partnership, a long-standing partnership with SeatGeek, who are ticket, they're like a challenger brand to a Ticketmaster or StubHub. And we've been a big channel for them, driving ticket sales to sports events and concerts for over 3 years now. Their business is halted right now. So we're going to be flexible with them, and we're going to be there when they're ready to come back. And we are supportive of them whenever that is. But, you gotta, you have to have some level of empathy for the companies that are going through some macro changes right now, and it's totally out of their control.
So I've heard mixed things, which is always the case when you talk to a bunch of people. Some people are saying during this crisis, I was talking to one, pretty big digital publisher who was saying, take your pipeline, cut it in half, and then cut it in half again. The people who were, that your sales team is saying are like 75% are really 25%. The people that they're saying are 50% are not happening. And that you'll end up with fewer, bigger partners that stick with you. But then I also hear, particularly during this time, a $20,000 deal is the new $200,000 deal. Like, that you gotta take singles, you gotta take bunts, you gotta lean into it, maybe take hit by pitch. Which are you seeing?
So it's a mix. I would say a couple things. Like, the benefits of long-term partnership are really showing to be true right now, right? If we have a multi-year partner that has an ongoing commitment, I feel good that even if their dollars are paused, we're going to be able to reallocate or repurpose them somewhere. So those partnerships, the relationships have never been better, in that if they're going through hardship, we're talking to them, we're working with them, and we'll come out stronger as partners. We also are a beneficiary of several of our largest partners are in the beer and spirits category, which is thriving right now. And they're looking for not only how do they get their message out more, but how do they increase what they're doing with us and across the board, I think. But their usual channels are disrupted. So they're coming to us and saying, hey, what can you guys do? We see people are watching, whether it's Dave unboxing videos on Instagram Live and YouTube, or whether it's, our Kevin Clancy's shows, KFC Radio is a big podcast of ours. He's doing, a Friday Night Pints live show. He's doing a game show that he created called Social Distancing, and we're garnering huge audiences. So perfect opportunity to integrate those brands.
I saw it's brought to you by Death Wish. I have Death Wish in my.
Oh, you do? Great. So, yeah, they're a great example of a brand who we had been having, I think, very preliminary conversations with, and literally the first brand to jump in when the country went into lockdown was Death Wish Coffee, and they've been integrated into a lot of our shows. And now I think they will come out, having seen a lot of success with us, and become a long-term advertising partner.
Yeah, I mean, they're a winner.
Singles and doubles. I have been telling my team, like, singles and doubles matter right now. Like, we're very committed as a company we're going to come out of this really strong. And Q2 is going to be pretty tough, I think, for everybody. But, Q2 is also not a huge live sports quarter for us. There's sports, but there's not as many tent poles happening, like Super Bowl and March Madness and college football. Those are big, and NFL, obviously. But, for us, like, Q2 is always a little bit of a slow month or quarter for live sports anyway. But singles and doubles matter right now. And I think if we can get some new advertisers in the door and give them that opportunity to test something at a lower investment level than they might have had to make in the past, like, we'll probably come out really strong, and we'll have more advertising partners than we would have. So
what categories are you?
$20,000 is the new $200,000. I'd still really like to see, $200,000 deals happening. But I think the doors are open for business, and we've always been a company that has welcomed smaller advertisers. The other thing about Barstool is, we have a really strong base of direct response advertisers, and we're
Mm.
seeing a lot of them really lean into this time. And I think one of the things I would tell brands to be careful of, I've had this conversation, is there are some brands that were doing well, and they've just paused advertising because of, not feeling comfortable right now, not messaging to people during a difficult time. And then their competitors are swooping in and taking the opportunity to make some noise. And you see what you just mentioned. You're noticing Death Wish coffee all over Barstool Sports. What does that say about the other coffee brands in the marketplace? So I would caution. I think there's a lot of opportunistic activity happening amongst the challenger brands and some of the D2C and startup brands.
Yeah. I mean, I would caution though with Death Wish coffee, like, it bills itself as the world's strongest coffee, and it
It,
might be. You don't want to free pour. You really want to measure it out, because it can really get the heart going, maybe a little bit too much. What categories are you seeing really stay strong? Obviously, we saw one with Grubhub, and food delivery is clearly going to be a winner.
yeah,
I've heard.
yeah.
I
So
don't know
I
if you guys have a
visited,
big tech category. Tech is up 100% at some publishers.
yeah. So tech, we're doing a lot with ExpressVPN right now. They've come in. We had never worked with them in the past. We know their agency really well. They came to us and said, like, show us what everything you've got. We're interested in seeing everything you can do. And they've come on board in a big way. Beer and spirits, again, like major category for us. A lot of existing partners in that category looking to figure out, all right, we thought we were going to do this. Now we need to find other things to do because there's no sports activity. So what are you guys doing? Um, so that's been a great category, and I'm excited for the return to sports because I think some of the big sports marketing brands are going to be looking to be a big part of that. So that's kind of an exciting conversation that we're having. And I know all the
Are
leagues.
you having those? So, like, from your partners, and again, Barstool, like, it's Barstool Sports, but I eventually it'll probably just be go to Barstool. But like, sports are like a major part of driving this conversation that you have, and I think obviously your programming has adapted, but like, the return of live sports is going to be, I think, massive. It's going to be massive for people's psyches, and it's going to be a massive opportunity for for advertisers to sort of, a lot of them are it seems like they're tied up. They're like, we don't know what to say. When we do say this supporting message with all the piano music, it gets mocked because we're all doing the same thing. Whereas this, it's like,
Depressing. Like, I've watched some of these live shows on the broadcast networks on the weekends, and I have to stop the commercials because they're like sad, and I'm like,
yeah, but
Saturday
like,
night, I need some levity, please.
the,
Uh,
the return to sports is it. It's like, don't overthink it. Like, you can
yeah,
just celebrate. Sports are back.
I think this is an interesting time because we've all, you and I and many others have been in the industry a long time, have lived through some difficult and challenging times that have impacted marketing and advertising. I always go back to, 9/11 was, I lived in downtown Manhattan. I worked at CNET. Like, it was a crash to my world at the time. But I remember, and I didn't even work in sports at the time, the the World Series coming out of 9/11 was what the world needed. It's what New York needed. It's what the country needed. I think we need sports right now. Everybody's just like, this is hard. We're all stuck at home. We're not doing the things we're used to doing. Our kids aren't going to school. They're not playing sports. I personally am like very sad about those things. And sports would make things better. So I do think you're right. And I think you're starting to see it. NASCAR is a big partner of Barstool. They're coming back. They have races in May. We're really excited about that. That gives us a lot. We're going to get behind them. Like, we've always been behind NASCAR since they've been a partner of ours, but right now is a
Wait, are
great,
they going to like pack the stadiums?
they are not, there's going to be no spectators,
Okay,
which
thank
is
God.
another thing I think that will be interesting to watch is how does that affect the players on the field, on the court or on the field. I think NASCAR drivers don't hear the fans, but the roar of a NASCAR audience is massive. What does the return to sports look like without
Yeah,
spectators? It's
it'll
going
be
to,
awkward. It'll be awkward. I mean, like, I can remember years ago, the Dallas Mavericks tried, the like annoying in-game music, and they like to say, you know what, we're not going to do the do 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 when the player, but like it was like awkward and weird because like everyone was like used to it. So I think
I
it'll be
saw
interesting.
something yesterday, Brian. I'm going to botch this a little bit. I think it was like Bundesliga. One of the European soccer leagues is selling. If donate money, they will create a cart and submit a photo of yourself. They will create a cardboard cutout of you, and they will put you in the stands at the matches. I don't know. Like they're going to get creative. They're going to figure things
Yeah,
out. Players are going to have to play without fans for a while. I think,
yeah, they'll adapt.
when does that come back? I don't know, but
It's kind of like watching, like, like every single sitcom had a laugh track, for decades, and then all of a sudden, like it became more sophisticated not to have a laugh track. Did we lose Deirdre? I think we might have lost Deirdre. So I'll go on with the analogy. Basically, everyone had a laugh track, and then all of a sudden, different shows didn't have laugh tracks. So hopefully, we will get Deirdre back again. This is a live show, so we have to sort of roll with it. But I do think one of the more interesting things to see, and when we get Deirdre back, I'll talk to her about it, is Barstool as a brand is like very out there, and Dave Portnoy was talking about how they're hemorrhaging cash. I think Pierre, you have the slide up there, and that's the danger, or maybe it's the opportunity, of being sort of out there and being authentic, so to speak, and being open with people.
Brian,
Deirdre, oh
I'm
my
back.
God,
So sorry.
are
I,
you in a
I,
different room? There's
think,
the fireplace.
I think the Wi-Fi, something happened there.
I like it. You see, we had to adapt. So I was just actually talking while you were out of the room, about how Barstool is a very unique brand. It's authentic, and that comes with positives, and it comes with challenges for you. We've talked before, because you guys were forced to sort of have a more diversified model because there's large swaths of advertisers for various reasons who will just say, that's not for me. And you guys have chosen to be authentic to yourself, and that's all good and everything. How is it like with the sort of openness of it? I mean, I think we have there, Dave Portnoy was out saying, we're losing millions of dollars in advertising. And I think sort of the editor in chief was, there's a new kerfuffle every day, and he's saying, this is, we're losing lots of money. Does that like affect you on the revenue side at all? Or are you just like, hey, this is us?
Yeah, I mean that is very much the daily drama of Barstool. It's the part of the commentary. Dave is always very vocal and open on. He's open about everything. He's like as transparent as a person possibly could be about every aspect of his personal life and his professional life and the business. And people love that about Barstool. I've never worked at a company where people care so much not only about the creators and the personalities and the shows, but also what's behind the scenes. Like for instance, I'll give you a great example of a cool thing that's happened. Erica Nardini, our CEO, has launched a podcast during a pandemic, right? She had been talking about this podcast for a while, and the idea had been floated and the logo had been in the making and all that good stuff. And
This
I
is
think
Token CEO.
token CEO, yes. But the thing
You want to
is,
explain the
Erica's been
background of like,
busy, she's been pretty busy the last
yeah.
6 to 12 months working on a huge deal with Penn National Gaming. So the idea of launching her podcast was a nice idea, but I don't think she had the time. Now she's found the time, and she's changed the format, and she's doing a daily podcast, which is pretty unique. We don't have a lot of daily podcasts at Barstool. It's 10 minutes long, and the uptake on this podcast has been huge, and it speaks volumes to how much our audience cares about the business of Barstool and the health of the business of Barstool and the behind the scenes and the authenticity of our CEO. So, and then I think she's also garnered a massive audience of people who just love that, there's a female in leadership, or she's just an awesome leader regardless of gender, and she's very authentic and very real, and that's different than most CEOs who are very scripted, very buttoned up, and wouldn't say something that didn't get approved by the communications team. So this has been a really great outcome of the situation we're in. In fact, you mentioned podcasts are down. Well, this one has nowhere to go but up. And
That's great.
frankly, we've actually brought in multiple sponsors to the show that are, just loving it and doing really well. She has a presenting sponsor of Linens and Hutch, which is a home goods brand that makes sheets and bedding, like really high quality stuff. And they're doing a big promotion with us. And then High Noon Seltzer, which is a partner of ours as well, is sponsoring one of her segments. So, this has been a great example of, making lemonade out of lemons. Podcasting in general is down. You mentioned that. And, I would say we're fortunate in some ways that, again, one, we're not only about sports, but also our podcasts are franchises. They're not just audio shows that we put out on Spotify and Apple, and they're franchises. So the talent behind the podcasts will produce their podcast. We're putting more of them on YouTube than we ever have before, because we not only record them, but we film the recordings. Where they have massive social following. So again, some of them are creating new shows born out of the pandemic. So you might see, what Kevin Clancy has done for KFC Radio is he's created a whole bunch of new shows that are built on live video to augment his podcast. And that's kind of the direction we've seen. A lot of live is having a moment. Live on the internet is having a big moment. So that's kind of it. But yeah, no, the daily drama of Barstool is what drives our audience. It's what fuels it. It doesn't, more so than ever, I don't think it's turning away any brands or anything like that. I think if anything, we're seeing a more of an openness from some of the more conservative clients in advertising categories than we've ever seen in the past.
Yeah. So let's talk about the big deal. In January, Penn National acquired 36% stake, is it? Something like that. 36? Yeah. I don't know. For a lot of money, 163 million. Chernin Group had been, I believe, the majority owner for a while. Now they still own a big stake, but I think what was interesting about that was it was an unusual acquirer. It's a gaming company. You guys have always been able to drive action. I think that's what probably attracted Chernin Group to it, because anyone who has written about Barstool knows that you guys have fanatic following, a very deep connection. Obviously, there's no bets happening right now, right? Or are there?
Well, obviously, like all the major sports are sidelined for the time being, but again, that's coming back very soon. So the long-term bet on sports betting is still a very good bet. And I think Penn is, on so many levels, such a great partner for Barstool, such a great marriage of DNA. They're scrappy, they're gritty. Their CEO is like young, visionary leader. Him and Erica and Dave hit it off from the get-go, and Jay Snowden is just a phenomenal partner to us. Their business is hurting far more than ours, right? Like casinos are, they operate, I think, 41 casinos in 14 different states, and they're all shut down, and they're starting to talk about reopening, but it's going to be state by state based on government regulation. So they're in a tough spot. They had a great earnings call yesterday. They talked a lot about Barstool on that call, which is really great to see. And what's happening behind the scenes is, look, we're going to have the Barstool Sportsbook is still very much the strategy. So
but it's kind of on hold. I mean, this was an advanced question that we got about how.
No, it's not on hold, because it was never planning to launch until the fall. Our plan was to launch the app and be taking real money bets in states where it's legal by football season. that's still the plan. So the people working on that project are full steam ahead. There's no plans to slow it down or
Okay.
change those plans at all. We're counting on sports coming back, and we're counting on the fact that people are going to be so engaged in live sports
Yeah.
that there'll be more people betting on sports than ever before. And it's an opportunity, and we just need to get the word out that the Barstool Sportsbook app is there, and you can bet from your living room couch.
Okay. So that will not be delayed. It's like, I mean, obviously you can't control it. It seems like the SEC seems like it's coming back. College football will come back. The NFL is too big not to come back. They'll figure out a way. I mean,
The NFL
they've
announced.
never been super obsessed with player safety, so I'm thinking that they're
No,
going to come
they
back.
haven't. But the NFL announced their schedules yesterday. Those came out. Now those could be adjusted.
Yeah.
Depending. I think they're gunning for it. The season starting in September, but they will adjust accordingly. But yeah, it'll be different. There won't be fans in stands, but there'll be players on the field. They'll be broadcasting on television, and will be watching maybe more than ever before. So sports betting still is a very good
Um,
bet.
I want to just emphasize, please do use the Q&A function. We've got a bunch of like questions that I'm going through that were submitted ahead of time. So I'll just go through a couple. One was, how will live streaming play into your strategy moving forward? You talked about live having a moment. Is this a moment, or is this one that you're betting, so to speak, is going to stay around after whenever this is over?
It's a great question. I think for us, we've always been doing live streaming, but in the recent weeks, we have garnered audiences larger than ever before live streaming. But it requires people. I mean, you can live stream from your phone, so you can do it mobilely, but I don't know if we have the answer, but I think that like we'll continue to develop live streaming shows for digital and social platforms and bet on the fact that people will tune in to watch those.
Okay. Um, Another one, and this is a good one. A management question, which is, how has this remote working situation altered your own management style, if it has at all, and messaging for your team? I mean, it's everyone is who's in a management and leadership position, has to adapt in some ways to the fact that we're not all in the same room.
Yeah, so it's altered a great deal. It's funny, I I am someone who likes to manage, like, give people their space, give them some autonomy. I was in the office every day, and I actually don't sit in an office. I sit at a desk right amongst all of my team members, and I would go sometimes days or a week without talking to a specific member of my team just because we had so many meetings and so many external client calls and we're traveling so much. I talk to everybody every day now. I have a daily team with my sales leadership team and sales ops and sales marketing. And we just talk about what everybody's working on. And that's actually gotten exhausting because we also have so much going on that having these daily calls is time consuming. So now we're starting to get comfortable with, like, okay, let's do this every other day.
Yeah.
I'm having a weekly chat with just the AEs, who, I was getting kind of separated from them in the way that I was talking to the directors and the VPs, and I wasn't having that interaction with the some of the frontline folks. And I'll tell you what, like, I shout out, they're probably, hope there some of them are listening, to the account managers of the world, because in all of media, because there's no media plan on television, in print, in digital, anywhere that didn't change because of this. And so those folks have had just a massive amount of work put on them. And there's a lot of scrutiny on their work that wasn't there before. So I like to get together with my account management team and just like hear what they're doing. And I'm just so amazed
Yeah.
at their level of professionalism and how much they care about the quality of their work and the consistency of their work.
How do you see this accelerating changes to the sales process? I mean, one of a CRO who I was talking with the other day said, this is going to, you can't forget about, like, the in-person meeting that was 20 minutes of schmoozing is now a Zoom, and it's it's over in 15 minutes. So, like, you got to get right to it. It's more substance driven, and that, the days of the lunch and learn are going, they're not coming back anytime soon. So do you see this shifting how sales is done?
Yes, I do, but I don't necessarily agree with that person, and it might speak. I won't I won't ask to know who it was, but it might speak
I won't
something
tell you.
about what they represent and what they're selling. Our team are the amount of Zoom calls, the amount of time consumed, and actually these calls tend to just go over every time. I find that they're not 30 minutes, they're 45, and then I have to like be adjusting my schedule all day because I didn't account for the schmooze time. The Zoom happy hours, fun, but like I can't do them 5 days a week. I've got kids here, so it's an interesting time in the sense that like we're not at home, we're not in the office, we're not in Manhattan and Los Angeles and Chicago where, hey, out of sight, out of mind. Tonight, I'm on the road, I'm going out to dinner with clients. I'll give you a FaceTime on my way to the restaurant, but that's the extent of it. Now I'm sitting in my living room having these meetings with clients, and my kids are standing 5 feet away, like waving at me or jumping in the background and saying hi. So it's just, it has changed. I think travel is a question for me. Like, I was on a plane every other week. I don't know when we return to that, whether we do or do we need to even. Although, I was on the phone with my LA sales lead yesterday, and he's like, hey, are you coming out here on July 9th for the golf outing? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I can't answer that question today. So,
Maybe
what
secret.
does this mean? I will tell you too, though, the one thing that I love is that um, look, when times are good, people don't pay attention as much to the details when it comes to sales and revenue. When times are difficult, whether it be a time like this or just like a company that maybe isn't performing very well, I've been in a lot of startups that maybe weren't hitting revenue goals for reasons not necessarily due to the sales team's effort, but maybe the product and the relevance of the product in the marketplace or its relative value. People scrutinize and they look at the sales team and they look at their activity. So we are in this mode right now that is kind of a new level of rigor around our CRM and measuring activity and the quality of those activities and the results of those activities. And that's
Mhm.
something that, again, when times
But
are
are
high.
you so explain that a little bit more because I like the wonkiness of this. Like, I mean, are you finding what another sort of CEO told me, which was that the pipelines are getting a lot. There's always a little bit of noise in there, that stuff that's never going to get across the line, but it's like there's a
Yeah,
lot of optimism.
that's
Um, are you finding that there needs to be like a lot more rigor in like, hey, what's real, what's not in this pipeline?
yes. And what's a qualified lead and what's not, and 100%. Like looking at the pipeline a lot more closely, daily reporting from finance, partnering up with finance very closely. I have a revenue ops person who now sends out a daily report showing what is at risk, um, what has been canceled, and what has been reallocated, because we are effectively trying to reallocate a lot of dollars that maybe got put on hold. So we're looking at that daily with a lot of rigor in terms of the pipeline. And then if there's a question around something and it says, at risk is a very subjective term, right? So I will pick up the phone and call that person, the rep on that account or whomever is leading that account, and have a conversation like, what are we doing with this? Like, where are they really at? Is it realistic that these dollars are going to come back? And what are you proposing to them? Because if you're proposing that an event that didn't happen in April might happen in August, I would say we should stop talking about events right now and focus on virtual things and digital things that we can control versus
Yeah,
kind of banking on and hoping that events will come back. We do a lot of events where it's like we fill up, bars with
yeah,
people and have watch parties and do live radio events. And I think those things are probably on hold for a long
yeah,
time. And so we're trying to make sure we're proposing things that we can count on
yeah.
actually in place.
And that's the sort of the optimism versus the realism thing, right? So like you want to be optimistic, but at the same time, this is a business and you can't pin your hopes on stuff you can't control. Like who knows? I mean, you guys have gigantic like Super Bowl parties and stuff like this. Who knows when that's going to come back? We have big events. I don't know when they're going to come back, going to be
I
honest.
know. I it's funny. The last big event that we did was the Barstool Pond Hockey Tournament. That was in late February. We did 2 events, one in New Hampshire and one up in Lake Muskoka, north of Ontario. And I went to that event and we threw
That sounds good for social distancing. I've never been, but
it was the antithesis of social distancing.
oh,
I mean, if you know, if it could go back and do it all again, I don't know if we would have been there. But we had a massive party. We launched Pink Whitney, our flavored vodka partnership that we have with Gallo. We launched it in Ontario. It was massive, and it was crazy. It was chaos. It was so fun. And then a week later, we were shut down.
yeah.
So
Well, at
it's
least you got it done.
wow.
Couple quick questions, then I'll let you go. Jacob, this is a good question, Jacob. It's a good preface too. The New York Times drove a record number of subscriptions in Q1 2020, but they have guided about 50% decline in ad sales for Q2. What is the magnitude of the COVID impact on Barstool has observed on its ad and slash subscription business?
So really interestingly, on the subscription business, we actually did away with it during COVID. It's a bigger strategic decision that Erica and Dave made. I don't really oversee that piece of the business, but we just decided that we wanted to make all of our content available to everyone and reach the broadest audience possible. Our sub business was a very big success story when we launched Barstool Gold. We had over 30,000 subscribers, and we basically didn't renew that business. Let those subscribers out of their payments and made all.
But a lot of this was Rough and Rowdy's subscribers, right?
Rough and Rowdy and Barstool Gold were combined. So yes,
Yeah.
you buy one, you get the other essentially. Rough and Rowdy will still be a pay-per-view event when we can get back to having Rough and Rowdy events. Well, there's states that would do it right now if we wanted to, but I think we're waiting.
Jacob asked about both. Jacob, this is a lesson about questions of people like Deirdre. They'll choose which one they want to answer if you ask about both. So let's talk about the ad business.
Yeah, the ad business, I'd say we're not down 50%. No way, not even close. But definitely we're down from where we were. We are fortunate, though, that we were up like 100% year over year. So while we're down, we're still thriving, I'd say, relative to, other companies in years past. But, I'm probably forecasting like a 20 to 25% decline.
Okay.
In the short term. In the long term, I'm not actually adjusting goals or anything like that yet. I'm optimistic, and I'm optimistic that given what we saw in March and April, that the partners that are with us, if things have to change with what we actually sold them, that they'll be willing to take advantage of the new content we're creating, because we are creating so much viewership and engagement, and that's really what they came to us for. So if there's a college football season, our college football show will go on. But if there is no college football, I'm going to talk to Phillips Norelco, Anheuser-Busch, Gallo, and Body Armor about where do we put those dollars where we can engage fans and consumers to buy your product. So I'm hopeful that there will be college football, and that we'll make that happen. But we'll also pivot if need. And I think we've shown a good ability to pivot very quickly. One of the things that's really interesting about Barstool is it's been around a long time as a brand, but as a real business, it's only been around 3 or 4 years, right? Since Shernan first came in and Erica instituted like more business practices around the brand and the content. We overnight, put our talent, our top people back in their living rooms where they had actually come from not that long ago. Yeah. They weren't used to all the lights, camera, action, production people all around them, big, nice studios that we built in New York City. They used to just do their podcasts from their living room and do the Rundown, which is one of our shows, over Skype. And so we've kind of gone back to our roots, and it's really interesting to see the old guard, the original Barstool talent, without even a hesitation, started creating their existing original programming and new shows from home. Dan Katz, the host of Pardon My Take, created Cat Cave Derby. He streams this live every day on Periscope, and he's getting 250,000 views per stream. Dave Portnoy with his unboxing has been wildly successful. then there's some of the younger talent that are newer to Barstool that you just didn't know how they were going to react to this. And you have like Marty Mush, who's created a show called Mush Madness, where he's like streaming himself on Instagram Live doing like the equivalent of trick shots, essentially, garnering huge audience and now attracting sponsors. So I think we're unique in that, we've always had a little bit of like a lo-fi production quality that people like us for that. They think it's funny. They think it's endearing. They think it's very real, very authentic to us. It's harder for somebody who's been sitting in like a beautiful studio in, Manhattan or Secaucus or Los Angeles to now start streaming from their living rooms and basements. And some of the late night shows are doing a good job, some are not, but it's really interesting to see how the talent and the personalities have adapted, and who can carry a show without a bunch of people around them creating, a sense of.
It's funny. I've heard a lot with the going back to the roots. I've experienced it also at Digiday. You sort of go back to, where things, were in the early days. Things were like messier. People were in their apartments and stuff like this. And that's an interesting one that.
And then the other thing is like, sports are sidelined. Of course, we want to watch live sports. We want to see these athletes do what they do best. But while they're not playing sports and they're locked at home, they're available more so than they've ever been. So we're doing something right now. Spit and Chicklets is our hockey podcast, and they launched a Twitch channel. They'd never done live streaming on Twitch before. Their producer, Mike Grinelli, is a young guy, likes to play video games, set up the channel. The talent set up a whole tournament, and they're playing a tournament with NHL players joining the tournament, and they're commentating over it, and we're live streaming it on Twitch, and then we're repurposing that content on other platforms to reach broader audience than we can garner on Twitch. So, we're kind of leaned into esports in a way that, again, Barstool had been dabbling in a way, but now is full force in there.
Yeah. So final thing, and I don't know if this falls under you, but maybe you can talk around it. How are you managing, this comes from KL, how are you managing your e-commerce supply chain, incoming and outgoing inventory? Do you find customers canceling orders? How are you dealing with inevitable customer frustration? Because there's a lot out of your control, I assume, with your partners.
Yeah, so we've actually had an interesting dynamic with some of the direct-to-consumer DR brands. Some of them have had so much success early on that they've had to stop advertising because they can't handle the volume of business they're getting. Some of the like food boxing companies, I won't name names, but like if you're selling, order this box and we'll send it to you like monthly subscription, like you just got an insurgence of new customers, and you have to make sure you can service those customers and get them product on time. Some of the exercise, that's a business that's booming, right? Is home exercise, whether it be stationary bikes with subscriptions or just different apps that you can use, like they're having supply chain issues. And so as a result, instead of being like, wow, they must be doing well, call them, they'll advertise with us, the opposite is true, which is like, we can't advertise right now, we need to pause because we can't get people our bike on time.
Yeah,
we don't want their experience to be, I ordered something and it comes 6 weeks later.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good problem to have, though, right?
Yeah, it's a great problem to have, but it doesn't help me trying to ignite their marketing dollars.
I know. But final thing, just because it came in from David, it's a good question, and this is a good big picture one to end with, which is, from where you sit, Deirdre, but you've changed where you're sitting, but
I'm not that far from there. But.
Okay. What do you think the longer term impact will be for larger legacy sports media companies with tons in live sports and the costs to show those sports? I mean, this sounds like it's about ESPN. I mean, Disney, it's very funny, by the way. Disney was like, everyone was falling all over themselves about how Disney, Iger was riding out on the sunset, and now all of a sudden Disney's got parks, they've got exposure to live sports, they've got like all these theatrical releases. I mean, they're in like
right, they're getting hit from all sides. It's I mean, look, that's a very big question. If you need to ask like a media research analyst to answer for you, call Rich Greenfield. But I think that the landscape will be altered. It was already altering. There's been a big movement going on for a long time to streaming and OTT. Um, I sit on calls with the IAB and Alexander Group with a lot of like CROs across the business, and the streaming companies are doing really well right now. They're seeing huge increases in subscribership. Like, do you think somebody who cut the cord during this time is going to come back when COVID-19 is somewhat resolved? I don't think so. I think they're going to switch to YouTube TV, Hulu, whatever the right bundle or package is for them. And if they're a sports fan, YouTube TV seems to be a great package that people will talk a lot about. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to have long-term impacts. I can't predict the future, but I can tell you that the subscriber increases on the OTT
Yeah.
streaming apps are huge right now. And I think once you make that leap, you don't go back.
Uh, it's funny because I got lost in the, like Roku. Like I'm not used to the TV here and stuff, and I ended up on Stadium, this OTT channel, Stadium. I don't know, random sports. I thought of Barstool because they had like there's a World's Strongest Man League,
Yes.
and so I could see you guys getting into that business. They lift some very strange things. A lot of like Finnish people and Scots and stuff.
Yeah, look, Barstool's never been in the business of acquiring live rights to anything. And I think right now, that's
Yeah.
a great thing for us. So, the fact that we're not sitting on huge investments in live sports that aren't taking place. Again, I go back to what I said at the beginning, like Barstool Sports, we can comment on sports when they're happening. We can comment about when they're going to come back. And our true tried and true sports personalities are definitely they're dying for sports to come back. And when they come back, people are going to want to hear what they have to say about what's happening. But the fact that we're not about live sports rights it's very good for our business right now that we're not sitting on.
Okay. We'll leave it there. Deirdre, do you have any, like, what is your final sort of takeaways?
For me, it's like focus on the positive. You can't control what you can't control. So focus on the things you can control. Be consultative as a business partner. That'll pay dividends in the long term. So for better or for worse, be a good partner, listen. And my big thing and what I tell my team every day is like make as many personal connections as you can make right now. Don't assume that people don't want to get on the phone with you, that they don't want to have a call or they don't want to have a Zoom. Like you might have one piece of information that is an insight that can inform a person on the other end that's making some decisions, and those decisions might impact what they do now or might impact what they do later, but they want to hear from you. And that's consistently what I've been hearing, and it's helped us a lot with our partners that we have, and it's helped us a lot opening new doors with new potential partners that maybe won't come on for a huge partnership today, but really value that we have insights to share, and that we're willing to share what's going on with our consumers.
Okay, Deirdre, thank you so much.
Brian, it's so great to see you.
Yes, we'll have to do it in person
Yeah.
sometime.
Look forward to your next dinner in New York City, whenever that might be.
Exactly.
All right.
So thank you all for joining us, and please join us next week, same time, different Zoom link, but register at digiday.com/TNN. Next week, I'm going to be talking with Kayvon Salmanpour. Kayvon is the Chief Commercial Officer with Boston Globe Media. And we're going to talk about local. How can local, survive when so many local businesses are basically shut down? So going to be talking about that with Kayvon next week. Please join us. Thank you all for tuning in.